This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, you are encouraged to like and share them on Facebook. Howard Insurance in Port St. Lucie now presents the African American Scene with Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you here on a Wednesday night. My, there's an awful lot of stuff going on. An endless amount of topics, but tonight I'm going to try to tackle, from my perspective, why we are so divided racially in the United States. And part of what has inspired me to do this is the many posts that I see where people seem to indicate that they are upset with people seeking equity in terms of justice and policing. Not sure why, but I'm going to attempt, this is from me, this is not from a textbook, this is my analysis of how we have gotten to where we are today. First, the bedrock of why we are where we are today is what I've talked about many times. And you know, I started reading the book White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, and she is a renowned sociologist, and she has done extensive studying on race relations and teaches that all over the country. And one of the things that she says, and she includes herself in this as well, that one of the cornerstones for why we have such disparate feelings toward each other is a lack of familial relationships. Now, if you listen to me for any time, I was glad to see that, because I've been telling you that on this air for more than 5 years. And in fact, some of you may recall, I encouraged you to take someone out to dinner or have lunch with them of somebody that's different than you. And that seems to be a major part of why we are at this impasse when it comes to race relationships. And whites tend to deal with whites, stick pretty strictly with other white folks. Blacks tend to stick with other blacks, but to a lesser degree. Because if you are a professional, you are, and you want to be successful, you have to learn the norms of white folks that you're going to work with. So you're kind of forced into trying to understand white folks and what's important to them, as opposed to white people having to understand what's important to you. And therein lies part of the chasm. I have this broken down into various categories. Let me start with first of what I think is part of the problem, which is stereotypes. Black people are seen as being dangerous. This started all the way back in 1915 with the famous film Birth of a Nation, which even our president showed in the White House. The Birth of the Nation portrays blacks as evil, and that the Klan had to control black folks. So yes, that was the first of many issues where there was a stereotyping of black people. The second area in the stereotyping is black people are lazy and want to live off of the government. Well, let's talk about that too. But we're going to talk to Jeff on line 1. Yes, Jeff.
I can totally identify with what you just said earlier because I'm a professional musician and I got called up to play one night on a different type venue than what I normally play. And I showed up at the gig and I was 1 out of 7 people that was white. And again, music has no color. You've heard me say that 100 times. And they looked at me and they said, well, you sounded like a black man on the phone. I said, well, how does a black man sound? I've sort of lost on that. Well, we ended up playing in a little club in Boynton Beach, Florida. They had a big show going on down there. There must have been, 1,000 people. It was a packed club. And I got caught out back unloading equipment, and 2 guys were, dude, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm the guitar player in the band. He goes, that's bullshit. And I said, no, it's not. It's the truth. And for a few minutes there, I felt like I was in trouble until the other guys in the band came out and looked at the 2 guys that was talking to me, and they said to me, are you having problems over there? I said, no, they're just talking with me. And I think the 2 guys that was talking to me sort of took that as a little respect that I didn't jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, yeah, they're messing with me, or they're threatening me, or that, it was how I took what they were saying, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm playing in the band. Yeah. They didn't believe me. It was like, it was a situation where, hey, I was on the other side of the coin. And it got, and believe it or not, by the end of the night, I had everybody's respect in that place.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Just, everybody's respect. And it was like, again, music has no color. Unless you make it have color. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
It's like, you can put verbs and words into a song that makes, but as far as music goes, it doesn't. But I wanted to tell you about that because that was sort of a situation where, I was out and, I was in the wrong part of town. What is the wrong part of town? Place where white people don't normally go, But that's where you have trouble.
I live on the wrong side of town.
Why can't everybody just go and have fun? And I don't want to hurt you. You don't want to hurt me. We just everybody have fun. If I'm a jerk, tell me I'm a jerk, and don't let it go. But that little threatening there to begin with. What are you doing?
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I certainly I certainly believe that could have happened to you.
Oh, it did. I was scared to death for a few seconds there, but I got, it was a nervous situation.
Okay.
But anyway, Rudy, you have a great night, and I'll continue to listen.
Okay, thank you. And we got Ryan on line 2.
How you doing? Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Yes.
Well, I'll just put it this way. Only Democratic show I can find on this network. I just recently moved up from Fort Lauderdale, so for the last couple of months, favorite show on here.
Well, thank you.
but there is a real reality of what you're saying. There is a disconnect, and there's a wealth gap. So, and I noticed it less like how you were saying blacks stay with blacks, whites stay with whites. More in urban areas like in Chicago or even down in Miami, we coexist more better. I notice up here it's a little more, conservative, and it is a little more different. But I think that's the social disconnect, and a lot of people really don't realize, what's going on with that because especially white people, they haven't had to live with the disadvantages in certain aspects. Like when it comes to getting a mortgage approved or a bank loan or even, things like that.
Well,
People on a grand scale don't really understand that. And then they look at high
I'm so glad
crime
you said
areas
that.
in like Miami. Like I know about South Side Miami, just like South Side Chicago, but you're already put with the rock against you. It's hard. You know what I mean? So
thank you for acknowledging that.
There's already there a social disconnect, and it's to get beyond that. I don't know what you can do about it. When I moved up here, it seems super Trump town up here. Like I don't even know. It's crazy. It's like,
well, there is, but if you keep listening to the show, I'm going to give my prescription for how I think we can try to bridge the gap. But
I love listening to your show. I hear that one guy that calls in all the time, and I listen to him and I shake his head. And especially when he starts talking about deficits and all that.
Yeah,
we were at a surplus with Clinton. We did the best we ever did with Clinton.
That's right.
And I know it. I'm a numbers guy. So I don't understand. It's very simple. You just look at the analytics.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate you call. Keep listening.
Best show you got on here, and I love the swap shop too. Good show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You take it easy, brother.
Okay, thank you. And Steve on line 3.
How you doing, Rudy?
Okay.
One of the disadvantages of being on hold is I can only hear you, can't hear the other guy.
Okay.
But one thing I wanted to point out is that hate and all that, you are not born with it. You are taught it.
Yeah.
And you were taught it by usually your parents, your grandparents. My great-grandparents were born in 1860, died in 1959, 99 years old, sharp as a tack. And she used to tell me about how growing up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s in this country. And we're from Missouri, from the Appalachians. And she said to me one day flat out, she goes, you don't hang around black people, you don't hang around brown people. And I said, why? And she says, because you're white and you're superior. And I knew right then that my great-grandma was corrupt as you could get.
Yeah.
We know better than
But
that
again,
today.
she was born in 1860. What do you think her atmosphere growing up was?
Oh,
In
yeah.
the Deep South.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So-
That's part of why I'm doing this show, because
My next-door neighbor.
there's a corruption that exists in the people in our age group it's embedded, it's locked in.
Well, I was just going to say, the only one of the ways we're going to get rid of it is when our age group, and we're in our 70s, dies off.
Yes.
Because we keep perpetrating it.
Yes.
And it's stupid. My neighbor just moved in a year ago, is black. Him and I have become great friends. And, so we became great friends because we had a lot in common. We didn't care about who had the better tan.
That's right.
But most Americans don't look at it that way. They say, well, my uncle told me, or my dad told me, or I was always told this and that. We've got to stop that. And I'll tell you who's got to be the leader, the press. When you have the fake president get up there and tell a lie, you have to stand up and say, that's a lie.
That's part of
Let's not do that.
That's part of what my presentation tonight is going to be about. Media is one of the things I'm going to cover in here. So
Yeah, they're a big problem.
yeah.
They do not challenge anybody. When they know it's wrong, it won't challenge them. And look what's happening.
Steve, I got calls backed up here,
Okay.
so thank you, my friend. And we got Winnie on line 1. Yes, Winnie.
How y'all doing over there?
Okay.
Good. Okay, then you seen this on value on CNN. This black guy from Indiana, and he white supremacist tried to hang him.
I
You
saw
that on.
I saw that.
What you think about that? That's terrible.
That was awful. If I saw it today, and unfortunately, there was some white folks there that was telling them to leave him alone. And I believe if they had not been there, they would have hung that guy.
I believe so too.
Yeah,
Rudy.
But they was there. There were white people there that was saying, "Leave him alone. Let him go." I mean, you could hear him clearly saying that. So, but yeah, that was pretty bad.
I know that there were two had got hung. Two got hung in California, and somebody was telling me there had to be a group of them did that.
Yeah.
You know, you had to be more than one. You know,
Extra charges for hate crime, though, right, Rudy?
Yeah.
The hate crimes have extra
hate
additional charges.
Crime.
Well, thanks,
but
Winnie.
I'm glad they stopped it. Okay,
Yeah.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We got David on line 2. Yes, sir.
Hey, David.
I guess he's gone.
No, I hear his radio.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, all right.
Speak into your phone real good so we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Hi, how you doing tonight, Rudy?
Good, good.
I grew up out in Indiantown, 60s, 70s, lived there until 1980, and being born multiracial, I got a little bit of everything in me. I was too dark to be white, too light to be black when I was growing up as a kid. With curly hair and everything, everybody took me for Spanish. So I grew up knowing what racism was on both sides of the spectrum. And I have two multiracial, actually biracial grandkids. And I have tried to explain to them what to expect being biracial. You don't fit in either side. So you're going to have to learn to deal with that young. And know, bottom line, regardless of how light you are, you're still black when it comes to society. And it's tough growing up when you look different.
Yeah, but I think there has been, well, traditionally, because way back, if you remember the old adage was, if you had
black blood,
that's right, then you were black. So,
Yep.
so those people that had black blood were typically accepted by black folks because that was the only place they could go. Then we had some who would pass, and there's a couple books out there about, and I've read a couple of them where somebody lived their life passing as white when they were really black. So. But I think it's a little different. What I think the challenge is, and I've got two biracial grandkids. The challenge is to make sure that the kids understand their heritage.
Exactly.
So that they understand who they are. Because sometimes biracial kids, because I saw it myself growing up, get lost. They're not sure who they are and what their identity is. They can be free to pick their own identity, but they at least need to know the basics of who they are. That's important.
Right. Exactly.
Well, thank you.
I got two 16-year-old grandkids, and I've hammered that end on both of them. And so far, they've done good in life, and I'm hoping they'll continue.
Well, thank you so much, David, for calling. I appreciate you.
All right. You have a great night.
Okay.
Right.
So we were talking about stereotypes as a contributor to prejudice and discrimination, and we talked about Birth of a Nation, which was a widely watched film that portrayed black people as evil and that the Ku Klux Klan had to control them. And this movie was so impactful, it was actually shown at the White House by the president. Here's stereotype number 2. Black people are lazy and want to live off the government. That's a stereotype, and that there's a lot of people that believe that. Now let me put this in perspective for you. I'm surprised at some of the sophistication of some of my callers. They're really on top of their game, understanding some of the impediments that black people have to deal with. in the 50s, the well-paying jobs were in the government. It was not perfect, but that was where black people had a chance for success. Now, I'm going to educate you on something you don't know. I found out several of my father's friends who were at the post office were graduates of HBCUs, historically black colleges. And the best job they could get at that time was the post office. And for most black folks in my father's generation, the post office and teaching were like the creme de la creme, because all the other things were not areas where you could be into. So yes, black people did look to the government because the government was where they got a fair chance, because the private market was not willing to hire black folks. Freed slaves, in many cases, were highly skilled laborers. You have to remember, I talked about this, I think, a couple weeks ago. They were the ones that built the barns, built the mansions on the plantation. They were very sophisticated people when it came to construction and labor. Now, if you talk to any black person my age who had an uncle that was older, those guys could fix anything. You give them a hammer and a nail, and they could darn near fix anything you could think about, because that was the orientation they had from their fathers and forefathers of having to do that when they were on the plantation. So this idea that black people were lazy is an idea, but it has stuck. See, here's the thing, it's stuck. And because you don't have the benefit of the knowledge that I have about older black men and their labor, you believe that. It is in your DNA now. Then we had Step and Fetch It, and Step and Fetch It really hurt us because if you didn't know, I had a trivia question on him about a year ago. Step and Fetch It was the first millionaire black Hollywood star. And he made his money portraying a lazy man, shiftless and didn't want to work. Now, that's a problem. And the reason why that's a problem is there was, at that time, no countervening messages. Do you hear me? That there was nothing to offset that. So while he may have been funny, and I was glad that he made a lot of money, that image of him stuck in people's minds. That's who they thought we were.
What's ironic about that is the white folks that look at the stereotypical, they'll say a lazy guy. They've got a 36-year-old son that's living at home still, doesn't have a job, you know. but they're gonna judge somebody else for being lazy based on an image that was created in Hollywood.
Yeah,
and Hollywood made a lot of, even the cartoons. There are Bugs Bunny cartoons that are banned that you can't watch anymore.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, you can find them on YouTube, but I think the reason you can is you can look them up and see just how blatant and complacent everybody was, you know, at the time.
Yep. And here's another one that a stereotype. And I've talked about this on the show I don't know how many times, but I still feel compelled to have to talk about it, because on Facebook last week, this lady was in the store, and she walked up to this little Mexican woman and said, "Speak English." And she said, "Where are you from?" And the woman said, "I'm from America." and the lady got up in this little lady's face, and the lady smacked the stars out of her.
She did get arrested for assault, didn't she?
I don't know if she ever got arrested, but she smacked that lady in her mouth, and the lady, and there was a white guy filming it, and he said, "Boy, she deserved that. She got that. What she deserved." Now,
for saying she was born in America?
Yeah, the lady that smacked her said, "I'm American." Now, yeah, see, but people don't get it, and you know, I was talking to one of my friends about this recently, and here's why this is important, because I hear that all the time, and occasionally I hear people on Facebook say, "Why are you in America and you don't speak English?" Well, okay, let's give you a wake-up call here. Now, if you've listened to me for a while, you've gotten this lecture before, but let me give it to you again. Mexico was part of California before California was California. So they were speaking Spanish in California.
Well, white folks send their kids to school and give them an option of learning to speak Spanish.
Yes.
So
Arizona, okay, now listen to me very carefully now. Part of Arizona was in Mexico, so there was Mexican people in Mexico, in Arizona, speaking Spanish before there was white people in Arizona. And the same thing is true of Texas, and the same thing is true of New Mexico. So stop dwelling in your ignorance and learn something about America. Because somebody speaks Spanish doesn't mean they're not from America. So, okay, all my conservative friends that are listening, drink that in, swallow it, and put it in your brain that everybody that speaks Spanish is not foreign or a illegal immigrant. They may have been here before you got here. Their families may have been here before you even thought about coming to America. So just get that in your mind. So that's another stereotype. Now, let's talk about another contributor to discrimination. Images, and why am I telling you this stuff? Because this stuff is like stencils on your brain. They imprint right on top of your mind images that you get built into who you are. Now let's talk about the Little Rascals in 1955, okay? Now, I'm no different than any other kid that was coming along then. I was a little boy, and I sat there and I watched Little Rascals and I laughed. But think about who Little Rascals were. You had those people, and his name just went out of my mind.
Spanky.
You know, you had
Alfalfa.
The one with the braids that.
There was a kid that had a curly.
The braids.
And he
the
sang
braids.
off key.
Oh, that was Alfalfa.
Oh.
But anyway, the images of those black kids in Little Rascals was not indicative of who black people were. But now we all grew up watching that, and now you're a little kid and you're absorbing that. That's who black people are. You're absorbing that, absorbing it. That's not who black people were. They were caricatures of a TV show. But again, the sin is there was no counter shows that could show what black people were really like. So now you've now grown up with that as an image of who black people are. And here's my number one, and I've talked about this before, Tarzan. That has to be the most racist TV show ever aired on the station. Totally and completely racist. You got one white man in a loincloth,
King of the jungle.
king of the jungle, running around Africa, beating up all the Africans and controlling all the animals. Now, think about the subliminal message that sends. Come on now, just think about that message. You got one white guy in Africa, and the truth be known, he would have got his clock cleaned 20 times over messing with those Africans who were fierce warriors.
See, that's another thing that contributes to racism. The physical superiority of black men intimidates the hell out of white guys, especially police. And I'll say that, especially police. That's the problem. A cop will size you up, right?
Yeah.
And if he doesn't think he can take you, he's not going to just up and start harassing you. But then again, he's going to be scared enough to try to shoot somebody. And I think the fear comes first.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that the Black Lives Matter movement has taken a good effect. And I call it, look, they're letting everybody take the knee at the national anthem. I remember a rock concert that would open, on your feet or on your knees. And now the national anthem. It was a rock concert that did that, but that's the whole thing right there. The intimidation that the man doesn't have to say anything. The other guy is intimidated by the physical fitness, and you'll be surprised, folks. Test me on that. Look around. Try it. Try me on that.
So listen. Here's the point that I want to make that's important. Tarzan gave little white boys the idea that they were superior, okay? Because you saw this one white man running around the jungle and he could beat up all the Africans and he could control all the animals.
Take a lion,
yeah. And then you have, if you're a young black kid, like I was, that grew up idolizing Tarzan, then you would think, well, there's no way you could ever measure up to him, because look what he did to all the black people that he ran into when he was in the jungle. So you see, these things have a very profound impact on the way people think about themselves and each other. So here's another issue. The lack of black heroes. Growing up, there was no such thing as a black hero. So, only thing you saw was some of these negative images, and there was no, superhero of a person of color that you could relate to.
No, you're right. There was, there were full-face masks like Spider-Man. You wouldn't know, though. Batman, Superman, you're right. None of them were black people.
No, none.
Wow.
None.
Wow.
Black Panther was the first real move by a major comic book company to move into creating a black superhero. Oh. You think about it. Now, the first black hero on the big screen was Shaft.
Wow.
Think about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. 1971, and I can tell you for sure there's probably not a black person alive my age that did not run to the movies to go see Shaft in 1971 with Richard Roundtree, because that was revolutionary. He was the good guy. He was the cop that was taking down bad people, okay? And that was, and he took down white people, which, now, why would I say that? You say, well, why you have to make it? Did you know, here's a piece of information you may not have known. The first cops that were put on the force here in the South, they were not allowed to arrest white people.
I just recently learned that in the last couple of weeks because I've got a friend that's a black retired Vietnam veteran, of which I'm going to do a video documentary on him. By the way, I'll let you know when that's on the way because we're start getting all the stuff finalized for it. But we're going to start shooting. This guy, 69 years old, can do 100 push-ups without breaking a sweat, and he runs 5 miles every morning about 4:30, and he's never tired, and he's always working out. He says, "I'm in training for the rest of my life." I said, "Well, yeah, he sure is." And you can tell. I mean, it's very obvious.
Yeah. So when we saw that, boy, I'll tell you what, it was like revolutionary to us to see this guy, this black detective, arresting white guys on a big screen. That was pretty amazing.
He had more fans than the producers ever dreamed.
Yes, absolutely. That movie was wildly successful. So now let me tell you why. See, you may say, and some of you listening will go, "Wow, I don't see how that could have an effect." I said, "Well, let me tell you how this has an effect." Did you know during Obama's terms as president, his 2 terms as president, the black high school graduation rate went up? Silence.
Hopes and dreams of someday becoming the president of the United States did that.
There you go.
Black kids probably never had dreams of someday becoming president, did they?
That's right. So you had what all of a sudden little black kids could look and say, "Man, there's a hope for me that I can be successful doing something, because there's the president of the United States. He's a black guy." So
never let the dream die.
Yeah, don't underestimate the power of what I'm telling you. Now, the media has also been a contributing factor, and Steve talked about that earlier, and this certainly was part of what I wanted to talk about. The media, wittingly or unwittingly, has been a disproportionate in the way in which black crime is portrayed. More often than not, when a crime is committed, you will see the black person displayed in the evening news, and a lot of times, this is a little joke, inside joke among black folks, when you don't see the picture of the person that committed the crime, we almost automatically conclude that was a white guy as opposed to a black guy. And that's kind of stupid, but that's kind of where you come from. You think to yourself, but the media has made a portrayal of crime when it comes to black people in such a way as, and I don't know, I don't think it's conscious. I think some of these things are just subliminal, just from the training and the orientation that I talked about earlier. It's in your soul. It's in your DNA from what you've been told as a little kid. So it naturally translates into your performance and how you do your job. The other thing, welfare. When I say welfare, I will bet you all except for the well-educated will say black people.
That's not a fact.
Right. we know that, right?
Yep.
I've done shows on that. We know that the most people on welfare is white people, not black people.
Ignorance is not bliss.
Right. But see, the power of the media has people thinking that. So when they say welfare, you say black and welfare are synonymous. Not true. Most of the people on welfare are white. Now, this was given a tremendous boost by the Republican darling Ronald Reagan. when he came up with his welfare queen, which they never were able to verify existed. He gave that story about the welfare queen, and people ran with that story, and it added to this particular belief that welfare was something that black people are responsible for. And we got Brian on line one.
Hey, Rudy, how you doing?
Okay.
Yeah, I was just listening, getting off work, and I heard you say interesting point about the media and how when a crime takes place, if the perpetrator is black, that they're really quick to show that and give out all information. And on the surface, we could say, well, yeah, they're just relaying the pertinent facts of the case or the crime or whatever. But then when they don't show the perpetrator's face or identity or give much information, then most of us in the black community, well, we pretty much can guess, the ethnicity of the perpetrator.
Now, isn't that amazing? You and I are two different black people, and we both have the same exact conclusion.
Yeah, it is, and it's an interesting. To me, it's extra interesting because most conservatives, like myself, would have the opinion of mainstream media as being more liberal leaning or more left leaning.
Yes.
So it kind of like makes me scratch my head like, wait, hold on a second now. What is going on here if on the surface, the fact that black people are committing crimes is being more exposed or played up, if you will, as opposed to when a non-black commits the crimes, but the media is more liberal, according to lots of opinions on the conservative side. It's just kind of weird, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if that's making any sense, but
yes, it does make sense. And I'm glad you called up because you confirmed what I just said, and we're just two different people, and we come to the same conclusion.
Yes. Yeah, and my wife actually came across a funny video a while back, and it was a little skit they did, and it was a news team, and they were reporting on on certain crimes or whatever's going on, and they kind of had a little back and forth. So they had two black reporters, or two black journalists, and two white journalists, and they were basically had kind of like a betting game. It turned into on the color of the perpetrator, whatever they was reporting on, and it's kind of comical, but at the same time it's like, yeah, that's pretty much what we be saying. So, but yeah, I just wanted to
Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. You're definitely not wrong on that, but it's kind of weird that would be the case. But then we label the media as liberal, so it's like, wait, what's going on here? That's kind of like a mystery. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with that, but it's kind of like, what's up with that?
Thanks, Brian.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad you called up because that.
In light of what Brian has shared with us, do you suppose the media should take some of the responsibility for white police officers who shoot black men?
I think that the video camera, the camera phone, has just been absolutely stunning in terms of providing us feedback. But yes, I do think that in the past, I think they have come full circle, but I think in the past, the media has been reluctant to show derogatory pictures of police officers. But that time has come and gone now. I think in today's climate, they're obligated to do that when that is the case.
There's cell phones with cameras in them everywhere now.
Yeah. Now, here's another thing that I want you to think about as a conservative. You folks absolutely hate Al Sharpton with a passion. I don't know one conservative that doesn't hate Al Sharpton. But now, I want you to get this in your head. When Al Sharpton's fighting for fairness for welfare recipients, guess what? Surprise, He's fighting for white folks.
Ah.
Think about that. Boy, I bet you never would think that in a million years. But now that I've told you the majority of people on welfare is white and not black, when Sharpton's out there fighting to have proper fairness in the way people are treated on welfare, he's fighting for white people. Let that sink in. I could see some of you sitting back there going, "Oh my God, is that true?" Yes, that's true. That's true. If the majority of people on welfare is white and he's fighting for justice in the way people on welfare are treated, he's fighting for white folks. Now, I'm not going to get through everything because we're getting near the end, but what I want to do is I'm going to skip to my last point, which is, what can I do? What can I do to try to help make this better?
Open your mind. Don't face anything with a closed mind.
That's certainly one of them. A, don't let Uncle Joe tell those off-color jokes, especially around your kids and grandkids. Stop him dead in his tracks. Don't let him do it, because he's imprinting on your children. Don't let Uncle Joe tell those jokes. That's not funny.
And if you're a young child listening in, you have the authority to tell your uncle to stop it.
Right.
Because you're a family member and you love him and you care about him. You don't want to see him get his ass beat.
That's right. Black people, do not remain silent when somebody says something offensive in your presence. If you don't call them out, they will do it again. And they're going to do it to somebody who may not be as nice as you and want to knock them out. You should call them out, because I'm telling you, I was dealing with a guy on email and I had to stop because he was so intoxicated. He was so built into all of this negative stuff. And I would warn him before he'd write me back. I'd say, think about it before you write me back, because when he does send me that stuff, I usually curse him out, which is not my way. I call him all kind of bad names, and then I feel bad about myself afterwards. But he's just an old guy, and he just thinks he can say whatever he wants to say. And he can't with me. But he got that way because he's done that for a long time in his life.
He was encouraged by others. Nobody shamed him for it.
That's right. All the other black people he's dealt with in his lifetime have accepted that from him. Now, if you know me, and my friends will tell you, I am not in any way prejudiced, but don't say that stuff in front of me, because if you say that stuff in front of me, I'm going to challenge you, and I will attack you for saying it. It's like a knee-jerk reaction. I don't let you get away with that. And I do it for you as much as I do it for me, because I don't want you to do it to anybody else. And here's another thing. Provide books and games for your children and grandchildren that are diverse in nature. You can do that. You don't have to go out and buy a black book. Just make sure it's a book that has black and white kids in it. That's part of building. Now you're putting an imprint on a kid in a very positive way, subliminally. If they open up a book and inside the book they see white kids and black kids, they're getting a message. I will share a story with you. I was at Walmart during the Medicare season, and this guy was in there with his beautiful little blonde-haired girl, and she was pushing around a black baby doll in her carriage. And I was absolutely overwhelmed. He was in the Walmart with his little girl, and she was the prettiest little thing, and she had this black baby doll, and it was A-OK with him. he was giving her some positive reinforcement that will last for a long time because he was supportive of that. Try to get to know somebody who is not like you. That experience will make you grow. I promise you, if you get to know somebody who is different than you and you get to know them well, you will learn some things about their life. They will learn some things about your life. And together, you will have had an experience that will be valuable to both of you. Another thing is be open-minded. This is what Cliff was saying. Take a pause and think before you pass judgment. Just take a pause. Think. Think it through before you pass judgment on what it is that you are about to criticize. And then finally, think before you speak. Think before you speak. Before you open up your mouth, run it through your mind's eye and try to decide whether or not that is the appropriate thing to say.
If it's a knee-jerk reaction, it's probably not the appropriate thing to say.
Yes. One of the things that I learned to do with my son, and I was actually pretty good about it, probably more than he would